First Contact Protocol. The alarm bells screamed across the bridge of the hegemony warship Eternal Dominion. Admiral Vorthak's four eyes widened as he stared at the readings on his command screen. Something had just appeared at the edge of their space. Something that should not exist. Report. He barked at his communications officer, his scaled hands gripping the arms of his command chair. Unknown vessels, Admiral. 200 ships emerging from hyperspace coordinates that our navigation computers say are impossible. Vorthak felt his throat sacs inflate with irritation. In 3,000 years of hegemony expansion, they had never encountered a species that could surprise them. The galaxy belonged to the Hegemony Council. 12 powerful alien races had joined together to rule over hundreds of lesser species. They had the best technology, the strongest weapons, and the most experienced military commanders in known space. "Show me," Vorthak commanded. The main screen flickered to life, displaying the tactical readout. The unknown ships were strange. They had sleek designs that looked almost organic, with smooth curves instead of the angular shapes that most spacefaring races preferred. Their hulls seemed to shift and change color as Vorthak watched, making it difficult to get accurate sensor readings. "What species are they?" Vorthak asked his intelligence officer. "Unknown, sir. The ship designs don't match anything in our databases. Their technology signatures are unusual." Vorthak's mandibles clicked together in thought. This was perfect. The hegemony was always looking for new species to conquer, fresh worlds to exploit, new technologies to steal, and more slaves to work in their factories. These unknown aliens had just delivered themselves right to his doorstep. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "All ships are to form attack formation. We'll give these newcomers a proper hegemony welcome." Around the Eternal Dominion, 2,000 hegemony warships began to move. They were massive vessels, some over 5 kilometers long, bristling with weapons and protected by energy shields that could deflect asteroid impacts. The combined firepower of the fleet could crack a planet's crust or boil away an ocean. Vorthak opened a communication channel to the unknown ships. His voice carried the arrogance of a species that had never known defeat. "Unknown vessels, you have entered hegemony space without permission. Surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in your complete destruction." For a long moment, there was only silence. Then a voice responded. It spoke in perfect hegemony standard, though the accent was strange. The voice belonged to a female, which surprised Vorthak. Most civilized species didn't let females command military vessels. "This is Commander Sarah Chen of the Human First Expeditionary Fleet. We are explorers, not conquerors. We suggest you reconsider your hostile posture." Vorthak laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Humans? Never heard of you. And I don't take suggestions from prey species. Last chance to surrender." "I see," came the calm reply. "Then perhaps a demonstration is in order." That was when everything went wrong. The human ships moved faster than anything Vorthak had ever seen. One moment they were holding position at the edge of sensor range. The next they were scattered throughout his formation, weaving between his massive warships like insects dancing around sleeping giants. "Fire! Fire everything!" Vorthak screamed. His gunners tried. The hegemony ships unleashed torrents of plasma fire, particle beams, and antimatter torpedoes. Enough firepower to level a city struck the space where the human ships had been. But they weren't there anymore. The human vessels seemed to flicker in and out of existence. Sensors would lock onto them for a split second, then lose them completely. When they reappeared, they were somewhere else entirely, usually behind a hegemony ship that was suddenly erupting in explosions. "How are they doing this?" Vorthak demanded. His science officer's voice was shaking. "I don't know, sir. Their ships appear to be using some kind of quantum displacement technology. They're not moving through normal space. They're stepping outside of it." A human ship materialized directly in front of the Eternal Dominion. It was tiny compared to Vorthak's flagship, no bigger than a hegemony fighter craft. But when it fired, the Eternal Dominion's shields collapsed instantly. The blast punched through 3 meters of armored hull like it was paper. Warning lights flashed across the bridge. "Shield generators offline. Hull breach on decks 40 through 50. Casualties mounting." Around them, the rest of the hegemony fleet was dying. The human ships moved with perfect coordination, as if they shared a single mind. They struck with surgical precision, targeting shield generators, weapon systems, and engines. They weren't trying to kill every hegemony soldier. They were demonstrating their complete superiority. A massive hegemony dreadnought, the pride of the Zephyrian Navy, suddenly went dark. All its lights died, Its engines shut down and it began to drift helplessly through space. "What happened to the Star Crusher?" Vorthak asked. "Unknown, sir. All their systems just stopped working. It's like their computers forgot how to function." More ships were suffering the same fate. The humans had weapons that could shut down technology itself. Weapons that reached through shields and armor to attack the very electronics that kept a ship alive. In less than an hour, the mighty hegemony fleet was reduced to drifting wreckage and disabled hulks. 2,000 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy had been neutralized by 200 vessels from a species that wasn't even in their databases. "Commander," Chen's voice came over the communication channel again. She still sounded perfectly calm, as if she had just finished a routine training exercise instead of demolishing the most powerful military force in the sector. "Admiral Vorthak, your fleet is disabled but not destroyed. Your crews are alive. This was a demonstration of human capability, not human cruelty. We could have annihilated you completely, but we chose restraint." Vorthak tried to speak, but his throat sacs had contracted with fear. He had never experienced defeat before. None of his species had, not in living memory. "We know about the Hegemony Council," Chen continued. "We know about your empire, your conquered worlds, your slave species. We've been watching you for longer than you might think." This was our way of introducing ourselves. What do you want?" Vorthak finally managed to croak. "Nothing from you, Admiral. We're not conquerors. We're explorers. But we won't tolerate threats to innocent species. The hegemony's expansion ends now. Any further aggression against developing civilizations will be met with appropriate response." The human ships began to withdraw, moving back toward the edge of the system. But before they disappeared into hyperspace, Commander Chen delivered one final message. "Tell your council what happened here. Tell them that Earth remembers every species you've enslaved, every world you've strip-mined, every civilization you've destroyed. We suggest you reconsider your expansion plans. This fleet was just our introduction. Next time we might not be so gentle." The human ships vanished, leaving behind only the floating wreckage of hegemony pride and a new understanding of humanity's place in the galaxy. They weren't the primitive species that Vorthak had expected to conquer. They were something far more dangerous. They were something that could fight back. As rescue ships arrived to collect the survivors, Vorthak stared out at the empty space where the human fleet had been. He had one terrible thought that he couldn't shake. If this was just their introduction, what would happen when they got serious? The hegemony's response. The emergency session of the Hegemony Council had been going on for 6 hours. In the great chamber on the capital world of Nexus Prime, representatives from 12 powerful alien species argued and shouted at each other in a dozen different languages. The universal translators were working overtime. High Chancellor Mordak, a towering insectoid creature with 6 arms and compound eyes, slammed his ceremonial staff against the floor. The sound echoed through the chamber like a gunshot. "Silence," he commanded. "We are here to discuss the human problem, not to bicker like children." The chamber fell quiet. Around the circular table, the most powerful beings in the galaxy turned their attention to the holographic display in the center. It showed the wreckage of Admiral Vorthak's fleet, floating in the darkness of space like broken toys. 2,000 ships, said Council Member Zexara, her reptilian features twisted in disbelief. 2,000 of our finest warships defeated by 200 primitive vessels from an unknown species. They are not primitive, Admiral Vorthak said from his seat at the table. The proud Kethani warrior looked like he had aged a decade in the past week. His scales had lost their shine and his 4 eyes were dull with shame. Their technology is beyond anything we've ever encountered. Council Member Thyros, representing the Machine Intelligence Collective, processed data at lightning speed before speaking. Analysis of the wreckage confirms anomalous technology signatures. The humans appear to use quantum manipulation at the molecular level. Their weapons ignore conventional physics. High Chancellor Mordak's mandibles clicked together in frustration. Impossible. We have explored this galaxy for millennia. We know every spacefaring species. Where did these humans come from? Unknown, replied Intelligence Director Vexhan. Our deep space monitoring stations have no record of their home system. It's as if they appeared from nowhere. The hegemony had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. In that time, they had conquered over 400 species and claimed ownership of tens of thousands of worlds. Their military might was absolute. Their technology was supreme. No species had ever successfully resisted them, until now. "What do we know about their homeworld?" asked Council Member Korthak, his massive frame shifting in his specially built chair. "Very little," Vexhan admitted. "Our long-range sensors have identified a system they call Sol, approximately 27,000 light-years from our core territories. Initial scans suggest a single inhabited world with a population of roughly 8 billion. 8 billion? Mordak's compound eyes glittered with interest. That's a substantial population for a single world. They must be overcrowded and resource-depleted, perfect for conquest and exploitation." Admiral Vorthak shifted uncomfortably. "High Chancellor, I must advise caution. These humans demonstrated capabilities that what?" Mordak interrupted. "That surprised and unprepared patrol fleet? You were caught off guard, Admiral. That won't happen again." The High Chancellor activated the main display, showing a tactical overview of hegemony space. Red dots marked the positions of military bases, shipyards, and fortress worlds. The display was overwhelming in its scope. "The humans caught us by surprise once," Mordak declared. "But surprise only works when your enemy doesn't know it's coming. We will mobilize the largest military force in galactic history. Every member species will contribute their finest warships. We will assemble a fleet so massive that it will blot out the stars." Around the table, the council members nodded in agreement. This was what the hegemony did best. When faced with resistance, they applied overwhelming force. It had worked against every other species in the galaxy. "How many ships?" asked Admiral Therek, the hegemony's supreme military commander. 50,000, Mordak replied without hesitation. "The combined might of our entire military. Every battleship, every carrier, every dreadnought. We will teach these humans what it means to threaten the hegemony." The mobilization began immediately. Across 12 homeworlds and hundreds of colonies, the call went out. Every spacefaring vessel capable of mounting weapons was pressed into service. Military academies graduated their cadets early. Shipyards worked around the clock to outfit civilian vessels with armor and guns. The species of the hegemony might argue about politics and territory, but they all agreed on one thing: no primitive upstart race would be allowed to threaten their dominance. Admiral Vextar of the Zephyrian Empire was chosen to lead the Grand Armada. He was a veteran of 50 campaigns, a brilliant tactician who had never lost a battle. His flagship, the Galaxy's Edge, was a mobile fortress armed with weapons that could crack a moon in half. As the massive fleet assembled in the Nexus system, beings across the galaxy watched in awe. The combined armada stretched for millions of kilometers through space. The smallest ships were the size of cities. The largest were mobile worlds, bristling with enough firepower to sterilize entire star systems. "This is excessive," Admiral Vorthak said privately to Vextar as they stood on the bridge of the Galaxy's Edge. "The humans demonstrated restraint in our first encounter." "Perhaps diplomacy." "Diplomacy is for equals," Vextar replied coldly. "These humans will learn their place in the galactic order. Beneath us." The journey to Earth took 3 weeks. 50,000 ships moved through hyperspace in perfect formation, their commanders confident in their overwhelming superiority. They had studied every piece of data from the first encounter. They had developed countermeasures for the human quantum displacement technology. They had weapons specifically designed to penetrate exotic defenses. When they emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, they expected to find a single blue world orbiting a yellow star. What they found instead changed everything. "Report," Vextar commanded as alarms began sounding across his bridge. "Sir, I'm reading massive artificial structures throughout the system. Orbital platforms around the third planet, space stations the size of moons, and sir, the shipyards." The main screen showed Earth in the distance, but it was barely visible through the massive orbital infrastructure surrounding it. Shipyards stretched for thousands of kilometers, their construction bays large enough to build vessels that dwarfed anything in the hegemony fleet. Defense platforms floated in perfect geometric patterns, their weapon arrays tracking the hegemony ships with mechanical precision. "How many ships?" Vextar asked quietly. I can't get an accurate count, sir. The orbital facilities are blocking our sensors. But sir, some of those structures are larger than our biggest dreadnoughts." Vextar's confidence began to crack. This wasn't the primitive world they had expected. This was a fortress system that made their core worlds look like frontier outposts. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "All ships are to maintain formation and advance on the third planet." We'll overwhelm their defenses with concentrated firepower. But as the hegemony armada moved deeper into the system, something impossible happened. The orbital platforms began to fire. The beams that lanced out from Earth's defenses weren't like any weapon the hegemony had ever seen. They moved faster than light itself, striking targets before the energy signatures even registered on sensors. When they hit hegemony ships, the results were catastrophic. A Kethani battleship simply vanished, consumed by a beam of pure annihilation. A Therian carrier fleet disintegrated as exotic particles ate through their hulls at the molecular level. The Zephyrian heavy cruiser Stormlord was hit by something that aged its hull 10,000 years in an instant, turning advanced alloys into cosmic dust. Shields. Get the shields up, Vextar screamed. They're not working, sir. The beams are passing through them like they don't exist. Around them, 50,000 of the most powerful warships in the galaxy were being systematically destroyed by weapons that shouldn't exist. The humans weren't even using ships. Their planetary defenses alone were more powerful than the combined might of the hegemony. In less than an hour, the greatest military force in galactic history was reduced to floating debris. Vextar found himself alone on the bridge of his dying flagship, watching as his life support systems failed one by one. A human voice came over the communication system. It was calm, almost gentle. "This is Earth Defense Command. The few surviving vessels are free to return home. Consider this our second demonstration. Next time, we might not be so understanding." As his ship's emergency systems carried him toward the edge of the system, Vextar had one terrible realization. They had just attacked the wrong species. The revelation, Doctor? Cathera had been working in the deep archives for 18 hours straight. Her 4 eyes burned from staring at ancient texts, and her tentacles ached from manipulating the delicate scanning equipment. But she couldn't stop. Not when she was so close to an answer. The destruction of the Great Armada had shaken the hegemony to its core. 50,000 ships gone in an hour. The most powerful military force in galactic history had been swatted aside like insects by a species that wasn't even supposed to exist. The surviving officers told impossible stories. Weapons that ignored the laws of physics. Defenses that aged matter itself. Technology that seemed almost like magic to even the most advanced hegemony scientists. As the hegemony's chief xenoarchaeologist, Cathera had been given access to the oldest records in the galaxy. Documents that predated the rise of the current galactic civilization by millions of years. Most of her colleagues dismissed these ancient texts as mythology, but Cathera had always believed that truth could be found in the oldest stories. She pulled up another file on her workstation. This one was written in Old Therian, a dead language that only a few scholars still understood. The text was damaged, with whole sections missing, but what remained made her blood run cold. And so the builders departed, leaving behind empty worlds and sleeping machines. But the ancient prophecies speak of their return, when the galaxy forgets its place and chaos threatens the order they established. In that day, the sons and daughters of the builders will emerge from their exile, and the pretenders will remember who the true masters are. Kethera's tentacles trembled as she accessed the next document. This one was even older, carved into stone tablets found on a dead world at the galaxy's edge. The symbols were so ancient that the universal translator could barely make sense of them. The first ones walk between the stars as easily as others walk between rooms. Space bends to their will. Time flows at their command. Matter obeys their wishes. They are the architects of reality, the shapers of worlds, the masters of the quantum foam. She had been finding references like this for hours, scattered across dozens of different worlds, written by species that had died out millions of years before the hegemony was even formed. All of them spoke of the same thing: the builders. The first ones, the masters of technology so advanced that it seemed like divine power to lesser beings. Cathara pulled up the sensor data from the human encounter. The quantum displacement signatures, the reality-altering weapons, the technology that operated outside known physics. She ran it through her analysis programs, comparing it to the ancient descriptions. The match was perfect. Her communication device chimed. She answered it without looking away from her screens. "Dr. Cathara?" The voice belonged to her assistant, Veltum. "You need to see this. We're getting reports from the border systems. Human ships have been spotted." "How many ships?" Cathara asked. "That's just it, Doctor. It's not a fleet. It's just a few ships, but they're different. They're not like the vessels that destroyed our armada. These ones are smaller, sleeker. And Doctor, they're not using hyperspace. They're just appearing. Kithara felt her heart's racing. Send me the sensor data immediately. The files arrived within minutes. Kithara studied the readings with growing excitement and terror. The human ships weren't moving through normal space at all. They were phasing in and out of reality itself, stepping between dimensions like beings from myth, just like the ancient texts described. Her hands shook as she opened a secure channel to the Hegemony Council. High Chancellor Mordak answered immediately, his compound eyes reflecting his desperation. Dr. Kithara, please tell me you found something, anything that can explain what we're facing. I have, High Chancellor, she replied, but you're not going to like it. She transmitted her findings to the council chambers. Ancient texts appeared on screens throughout the building, accompanied by her analysis of the human technology signatures. The humans aren't a new spacefaring species, she explained. They're the descendants of the builders, the first ones, the original masters of this galaxy. The silence that followed was deafening. That's impossible, Mordak said finally. The builders are mythology. Stories told by primitive species to explain natural phenomena. The evidence says otherwise, Kithara replied. Every piece of human technology matches the ancient descriptions perfectly. Quantum manipulation, reality alteration, dimensional phasing. These aren't new inventions, Chancellor. They're inherited knowledge. She highlighted specific passages from the texts. Look at this description of builder vessels. Ships that dance between the spaces of reality, untouchable by conventional weapons. Compare that to what our surviving officers reported about the human fleet. More silence from the council chamber. But if they're the builders, said council member Zexara slowly, then why did they leave? Why did they abandon the galaxy? Kithara had been wondering about that too. She pulled up another set of documents, these ones describing great wars between species that had achieved godlike power. From what I can piece together, the builders reached a level of technological advancement that threatened reality itself. Their wars were tearing holes in space-time. They were becoming a danger to the universe, so they imposed exile upon themselves. They retreated to hidden worlds and waited. Waited for what? Mordak demanded. For the galaxy to mature. For younger species to develop wisdom along with power. But Chancellor, that's not what happened. Instead, we created the hegemony. We became conquerors and slavers. We proved that we learned nothing from their example. The truth was spreading through the hegemony like wildfire. Emergency sessions were being called on every member world. Scientists were confirming Kithara's findings. The humans weren't just another alien species. They were the return of legends made real. That's when the human diplomatic ships arrived. They appeared without warning in the heart of hegemony space, phasing into existence directly above the capital world of Nexus Prime. The ships were beautiful, with hulls that seemed to be made of crystallized starlight. They ignored the frantic defensive fire from orbital platforms, the energy beams passing through them without effect. A communication channel opened to the council chambers. This is Ambassador Marcus Webb of the Terran Commonwealth, said a calm human voice. We request an immediate audience with the hegemony leadership. High Chancellor Mordak found himself in the unprecedented position of having to negotiate with beings who could simply ignore his defenses. The human ships could have destroyed Nexus Prime with ease, but instead they waited patiently in orbit, their weapons powered down. What do you want? Mordak asked. To prevent unnecessary bloodshed, Ambassador Webb replied. We know what you've discovered about our heritage. Yes, we are the children of those you call the builders, and yes, we have returned to active participation in galactic affairs. Why now? Mordak demanded. Why reveal yourselves? Because you've reached a crossroads, Chancellor. Your empire has grown powerful enough to threaten other developing species, but you haven't grown wise enough to use that power responsibly, the same mistake that led to our ancestors' exile. Through the viewing ports of the council chamber, Mordak could see the human ships hanging in space like impossible dreams. They were tiny compared to hegemony dreadnoughts, but he knew now that size meant nothing. These vessels commanded forces that could reshape reality itself. What do you propose? He asked quietly. Integration, Webb replied. Not conquest. Not subjugation. A new galactic community based on cooperation instead of domination. The hegemony's expansion ends now. Your member species will have the choice to join the Commonwealth or remain independent. But the age of forced conquest is over. And if we refuse? The human ambassador was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of eons. Then you will discover why our ancestors chose exile over war. The demonstration you witnessed at Earth was our defensive systems operating at minimum power. You have not yet seen what we can do when we choose to act instead of react. As if to punctuate his words, more human ships began appearing throughout hegemony space. Not fleets, but individual vessels that phased into existence above major worlds and military bases. Each one was different, with designs that seemed to shift and change as they moved. The message was clear. The humans could be anywhere, anytime. The hegemony's vast empire was no longer their own. Dr. Kythera watched from her archive chamber as history unfolded. The ancient prophecies were coming true. The children of the builders had returned, and the galaxy would never be the same. How the 10 fleets unveiled. The war declaration came exactly 1 week after Ambassador Webb's ultimatum expired. High Chancellor Mordak stood before the emergency assembly of the Hegemony Council, his compound eyes burning with desperate fury. Behind him, holographic displays showed the chaos spreading across their empire. Member species were in revolt. Colonial governors were declaring independence. Military commanders were defecting to join something called the Terran Commonwealth. They gave us no choice, Mordak declared to the assembled representatives. The humans demand our complete surrender. They want us to abandon everything our ancestors built. They expect us to bow down to them like slaves. Around the great chamber, voices rose in anger and fear. The proud species of the hegemony had never known defeat. The very idea of submission to another power was unthinkable. We still have our core fleets, Admiral Therick reported. Nearly 2 million ships scattered across our territory. If we can bring them together? No, interrupted Dr. Kythera from her place at the Research Council table. You don't understand what we're facing. The humans aren't just technologically superior. They're operating on a completely different level of reality. Mordak's mandibles clicked in irritation. Enough of your ancient mythology, Doctor. These humans bleed and die like any other species. We've captured some of their people from disabled ships. They're flesh and blood, not gods. Their bodies may be mortal, Kythera replied. But their technology transcends physical limitations. You're planning to fight entities that can manipulate space-time itself. The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was inevitable. The hegemony had never backed down from a fight, and they wouldn't start now. The war declaration was unanimous. Within days, conscription orders went out across the empire. Every species capable of space travel was required to contribute their ships and crews to the war effort. Civilian vessels were retrofitted with weapons. Ancient warships were pulled out of mothballs. Even obsolete patrol craft were pressed into service. The call was answered by billions of beings, Cathani warriors who lived for battle, Therian machine intelligences with no concept of fear, Zephyrian pilots who considered death in combat the highest honor. They came from 1,000 worlds, united by their refusal to kneel before the returning masters of the galaxy. Admiral Therick took command of the greatest military force ever assembled. 5 million ships of every class and configuration, dreadnoughts that could shatter planets, carrier fleets with fighter squadrons numbering in the millions, support vessels carrying enough ammunition to wage war for decades. This is it, Therick announced to his assembled fleet commanders. The final battle for the future of our civilization. We may be outgunned, but we are not outnumbered. For every human ship, we have 1,000. Today we show these ancient pretenders that the galaxy belongs to us now. The massive armada began its advance toward human space, confident that sheer numbers would overcome even the most advanced technology. They moved in formation through hyperspace, their combined mass creating gravitational distortions that could be detected from star systems away. But when they emerged from hyperspace at the coordinates where Earth's solar system should have been, they found only empty space. Navigation error? Therick demanded. No, sir, his helmsman replied, checking and rechecking his instruments. These are the correct coordinates, but there's no star, no planets, nothing. Therick felt the first touch of real fear. A star system didn't just disappear. Even with their advanced technology, the humans couldn't have moved an entire solar system. Could they? "Sir," called his sensor officer, "I'm detecting massive spatial distortions throughout this region. It's like reality itself is unstable." That's when the first human fleet appeared. It didn't emerge from hyperspace like a normal fleet. Instead, it seemed to unfold from dimensions that shouldn't exist. Ships materialized out of nothingness, their hulls gleaming with energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. "Ghost Fleet," came a calm voice over the communication channels. "Designation, stealth and infiltration. You are trespassing in Commonwealth space." The human ships were unlike anything the hegemony had seen before. They flickered in and out of visible existence, phasing between dimensions. When hegemony weapons fired at them, the energy beams passed harmlessly through empty space. But the human return fire was devastatingly real. Invisible weapons reached out to touch hegemony ships, and wherever they struck, the vessels simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, not vaporized. They were erased from reality as if they had never been built. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," Thirek ordered. "Concentrate fire on—" He never finished the sentence. A second human fleet had appeared behind them. This one was different. Massive ships that dwarfed even the largest hegemony dreadnoughts. Their hulls were black as space itself, and strange energies crackled between weapon arrays that defied description. "Titan Fleet," announced another voice. "Designation, World Crackers. Stand down immediately or face complete annihilation." Admiral Thyrek had commanded fleets for over a century. He had seen weapons that could melt continents and shields that could deflect stellar radiation. But nothing, in his experience, had prepared him for what the Titan fleet unleashed. A single shot from one of their weapons struck a hegemony battle group. 10,000 ships, including 3 super dreadnoughts, simply vanished in a flash of impossible light. When Thirek's sensors cleared, there wasn't even debris left behind. The ships had been reduced to their component atoms and scattered across light years of space. "Third Fleet incoming," his tactical officer reported in a voice that had lost all hope. The Phoenix Fleet materialized from what appeared to be burning stars. Their ships were smaller than the Titans, but they moved like living things. As Thirek watched in horror, the Phoenix ships began to replicate themselves. 1 became 2, 2 became 4, 4 became 8. Within minutes, the human fleet had grown from a few hundred vessels to tens of thousands. "Self-replicating warships," his science officer whispered. "They're building an entire army from raw energy." More fleets kept appearing. The Void Fleet emerged from black holes that opened in normal space. The Storm Fleet rode waves of exotic matter that turned space itself into a weapon. The Crystal Fleet sang songs that shattered hegemony hulls at the molecular level. Each fleet was different. Each one represented a different aspect of human military doctrine, and each one was more impossible than the last. "How many?" Thyrek asked weakly. 10 fleets total, sir," his sensor officer reported. "Each one larger than our entire armada." The human fleet surrounded the hegemony forces like a sphere of deadly stars. Admiral Thyrek found himself facing down technology that made his own weapons look like stone knives. Beings who had inherited the power of gods and learned to wield it with precision. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Defense Force," came a new voice. "Admiral Thyrek, you are completely surrounded and outgunned. Your forces are no match for our capabilities. I'm offering you one chance to surrender." Thyrek looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. Beings from a dozen different species, all united in their shock and terror. They had come here expecting to fight ships and soldiers. Instead, they found themselves facing forces that could rewrite the laws of physics. "You said 10 fleets," Thyrek said slowly. "Are these all of your military forces?" There was a pause before Admiral Chen replied, and when she did, Thyrek could hear something that might have been amusement in her voice. "Admiral, these 10 fleets represent our local defense force, what you call our home guard. The majority of human military assets are deployed elsewhere in the galaxy, maintaining peace and protecting developing civilizations." The words hit Thyrek like a physical blow. Everything they had seen, all this, impossible technology and overwhelming firepower, was just Earth's neighborhood watch. The humans had forces so vast and powerful, that they could simultaneously police an entire galaxy while maintaining enough ships to crush the hegemony without effort. "I surrender," Thyrex said quietly. "All ships, stand down weapons and prepare. To be boarded," came the order across hegemony communication channels. As human vessels moved to take control of the surrendering fleet, Thyrex had one final, terrible realization. The humans hadn't needed to reveal their 10 fleets. They could have ended the war with their orbital defenses alone. This had been a demonstration, a message to the galaxy that the age of conquest was truly over. The children of the builders had returned, and they had brought peace at the point of a sword that could cut through reality itself. New Galactic Order. The surrender ceremony took place in the ruins of the hegemony's greatest military academy, on Nexus Prime. Admiral Thyrex stood before a simple table, his proud uniform stripped of medals and rank insignia. Across from him sat Ambassador Marcus Webb, looking remarkably ordinary for someone representing beings who could reshape reality. "The war is over," Webb said simply. "Your fleets have been disabled, not destroyed. Your crews are alive and will be returned to their homeworlds, but the hegemony as a political entity ceases to exist as of this moment." High Chancellor Mordak, his compound eyes dim with defeat, signed the surrender documents with shaking claws. Around him, the council members who had once ruled hundreds of worlds now sat in stunned silence. "What happens to our people?" Mordak asked. "That depends on them," Webb replied. "Each species will be given a choice. They can join the Terran Commonwealth as equal members, or they can maintain their independence under Commonwealth protection. What they cannot do is continue the practices of conquest and subjugation." Dr. Kethara, who had been quietly observing from the side of the room, stepped forward. "Ambassador, may I ask a question?" Webb nodded. "Of course, Doctor. Your research into the Builder archives has been invaluable. The ancient texts speak of your ancestors' power to alter reality itself. We've seen glimpses of this technology, but I suspect we've barely scratched the surface. How much of your true capability have you revealed?" Webb was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer. "Doctor, what you've witnessed represents perhaps 1% of human technological capability. The fleets that defeated your armada were equipped with what we consider basic defensive systems." The words fell like stones into a silent pool. Even after everything they had seen, the humans had been holding back. "Then why?" Mordak demanded. "If you have such power, why not simply impose your will on the galaxy? Why offer choices and negotiations? Because power without wisdom is exactly what led to our ancestors' exile," Webb explained. "They became so advanced that they nearly destroyed the universe itself with their wars. We inherited their knowledge, but we also learned from their mistakes." He gestured to a wall display showing star charts of the galaxy. "Humans could have returned centuries ago and simply taken control. We chose instead to watch and wait, hoping that younger species would develop the wisdom to use power responsibly. When we saw the hegemony expanding through conquest and slavery, we knew it was time to intervene." Over the following weeks, the transformation began. Human ships appeared throughout former hegemony space, but they came bearing aid rather than weapons. Medical vessels brought cures for diseases that had plagued species for millennia. Engineering ships provided clean energy technology that ended resource wars overnight. Agricultural vessels shared knowledge that could feed entire worlds. The conquered species of the former hegemony were given a choice that many of them had never expected to receive: freedom. On the industrial world of Carthax, where the Therian machines had enslaved biological workers for generations, human mediators helped negotiate the release of billions of sentient beings. The Therians, faced with proof that biological and artificial intelligence could coexist peacefully, agreed to abandon their practices of organic servitude. On the mining colonies of the Zephyrian Empire, human terraforming technology restored worlds that had been strip-mined to barren rock. Former slaves found themselves the owners of fertile planets, supported by Commonwealth resources as they built new societies. The process wasn't always smooth. Some species, particularly the more aggressive members of the former hegemony, resisted the changes. The Cathani warrior caste declared that they would rather die than submit to human authority. The human response was typically unexpected. Instead of crushing the Cathani resistance, the Commonwealth offered them a different path. Human military advisors helped establish the Cathani Honor Guard, an elite force dedicated to protecting smaller species from external threats. The warriors found purpose in their traditional role as fighters, but now they served as protectors rather than conquerors. Dr. Cathara was appointed as the first director of the Galactic Archive Project, a massive effort to preserve and study the history of all known species. Working with human scholars, she began to piece together a more complete picture of galactic history. "It's remarkable," she told Ambassador Webb during one of their regular meetings. "The ancient texts were right about everything. Your ancestors really did shape the fundamental structure of this galaxy, the hyperspace routes we use, the stable zones where civilizations developed, even the distribution of habitable worlds. All of it was planned," Webb nodded. "The builders were gardeners as much as they were engineers. They seeded the galaxy with the potential for life and intelligence, then stepped back to let it grow naturally." "But you're back now," Cathara observed. "What does that mean for the future?" "It means we've entered a new phase of galactic development," Webb explained. "The Commonwealth isn't an empire in the traditional sense. We're more like shepherds. Our role is to guide and protect, not to rule." The proof of this philosophy became evident as the months passed. Human technology spread throughout the galaxy, but always with education and understanding rather than dependence. Species that joined the Commonwealth weren't absorbed into human culture. Instead, they were encouraged to develop their own unique contributions to galactic civilization. The Therian machine intelligences became master architects, designing space habitats that could house millions of beings in perfect harmony. The artistic Veltari created beauty that moved beings to tears across species barriers. The methodical Korthani became the galaxy's finest teachers, spreading knowledge with infinite patience. But perhaps the most remarkable change was in humanity itself. During a state visit to the Commonwealth capital on New Geneva, Dr. Cathara was given a tour of human civilization. What she saw defied her expectations entirely. Human society had evolved far beyond anything she could have imagined. Their cities floated in space, connected by streams of light that carried matter and energy instantaneously across vast distances. Their people lived for centuries, their bodies enhanced by technology that made them stronger, smarter, and more resilient while keeping them fundamentally human. "This is just one of our core worlds," explained her guide, a woman named Elena Santos who appeared to be in her 30s but claimed to be over 400 years old. "We have thousands of colonies, many of them in dimensions parallel to this one." They visited research stations where human scientists work to understand the deepest mysteries of existence. Art galleries where creators use controlled black holes as paintbrushes. Schools where children learn to manipulate matter at the atomic level as easily as their ancestors had learned to write. "How long have you been this advanced?" Cathara asked. "We began our expansion beyond normal space-time about 3,000 years ago," Elena replied. "Around the same time the hegemony was forming, actually. We've been watching your development ever since." "And the 10 fleets that ended the war?" Elena smiled. "Those were training vessels. Ships we used to teach our children basic defensive techniques." The revelation was staggering. Everything the hegemony had seen, all the impossible technology and overwhelming power, had been the equivalent of a school exercise for human civilization. As Cathara's tour continued, she began to understand the true scope of human achievement. They had colonies in other galaxies connected by pathways that bypassed normal space entirely. They had learned to communicate with the fundamental forces of the universe. They had achieved a form of immortality that preserved consciousness across multiple incarnations. And yet, for all their godlike power, they remained remarkably human. They laughed and loved and dreamed just like any other species. They struggled with questions of meaning and purpose. They made mistakes and learned from them. "Why reveal all this to me?" Cathara asked as their tour concluded. "Because someone needs to record it," Elena replied. "The galaxy is entering a new age, Doctor. An age where the impossible becomes routine, where species work together instead of fighting each other, where the promise of the ancient builders is finally fulfilled." "And what comes after that?" Elena gazed out at the stars visible through the transparent walls of the station. "After that, Doctor, we take the next step. The builders explored one galaxy. We're preparing to explore the universe." As Cathara returned to her homeworld, she carried with her the knowledge that would reshape how every species understood their place in the cosmos. The humans weren't just the returning masters of the galaxy. They were the next stage of evolution itself. The war that had begun with humanity revealing one fleet had ended with the transformation of galactic civilization. And this, they assured her, was only the beginning. In the depths of space beyond the reach of any sensor, massive structures began to move. Ships that were themselves entire dimensions, carrying exploration fleets toward distant galaxies. The children of the builders were ready to claim their inheritance, not just one galaxy but the entire universe itself. The age of conquest was over. The age of exploration had begun,